Welcome back to Donald Kent Art. It is so wonderful to have you guys here. There's people in the chat already. I have a very, very special show for you. I'm super excited about today's convo. C.P. Webster from the UK, amazing author and wonderful friend. How are you today, sir?
I'm very good, and thank you very much for having me so graciously, for having me on your show.
Oh my God. We've known each other for a while. We're on each other's sort of social media radar. Let's kind of tell the people how we met each other, the Bizarchives. Maybe you can talk a little bit about we'll get into who you are and stuff, but I just first want to let people know the bizarchives.com is a publishing company by Dave Martell. Now, if you don't know who Dave Martell is, we can't be friends because he's one of the coolest dudes out there right now. He's producing all kinds of fabulous books, sci-fi, cosmic horror, just an extraordinary character, a great heart, and just bang, just a marvelous guy. So we put the Bizarchives together. I did some illustration work on it, and Mr. Webster here did some writing. So tell us a little bit about your work with Bizarchives.
Well, yeah, I think it must be going back to 2022, and so not that far back in time, but I'd seen Dave on an interview, and
Mm-hmm.
he was talking about everything he was doing, and
Mm.
yeah, I kind of as soon as I heard him speak, actually, he's got such a great voice, and the way he talks, and he's so enthusiastic, and
Yes, yes,
you
yes.
know, he's the complete opposite of myself. I'm kind of introverted and shy, but he's great, and he sold it really well to. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go. I had a couple of stories in the locker, and I thought, well, I'll send one in. So that was I submitted a story, and it was accepted, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a very short story called The Reliquary.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, and that's when I saw your work. I think because I bought the first three editions of the Bizarchives.
Mm-hmm.
I think my first one was in four.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of your covers?
Yes, this is the
Yes.
cover
So this
issue.
is the June Lord's Dreaming, I think, by M.S. Jones. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a great cover.
There's actually a lot of English writers in the Bizarchives. I wonder what the connection is. I think there's more writers from the UK than there are from America. Any,
Um,
what do
yeah,
you think?
I think it's pretty much a 50-50 split. Um, in terms of representation, but and I think Dave always says it's something like the way that we write is very interesting because a sort of a difference between the American approach and the UK approach or the British approach.
Mm.
Um, yeah, there he is in the chat, Illuminatus.
Yes, yes.
Um, that's Mr. Creative there. Yeah, so I mean, so there is this whole thing about the different approach, and I think that's appreciated by the readers because you get a whole range of different sorts of
Mm.
Anglosphere
Nice.
stories in there. But yeah, representing both sides of the Atlantic.
Very nice. We could shoot off into 10 different directions on conversation, but I should back up a little bit and let the audience get to know you more. So I guess maybe you could just give us a sort of a little brief bio. Don't tell us about any of your work, with the Secret Service or any of that stuff, but just,
Okay.
your or any of your occult dealings. We don't want to know about that.
Okay.
Of course, I'm joking, but tell us a little bit. How did you become a writer, and what's it all about? Who are you?
Yeah. Well, I was born in the northwest of England, just
Mhm.
outside of the big city of Liverpool. Everyone
Mhm.
knows Liverpool.
Mhm.
Um, and I was always writing. I mean, I read at a very, very early age and got into the writing, as you do in school when you're given assignments, and often, just a very imaginative jaunt. But the writing itself really came when I was in my 20s, and by that time, my family moved to South Africa from the UK in
Wow.
1982. So I
Amazing.
just turned 17, and I had this choice: I could stay in Britain and
Mm.
finish my A levels, which is like sort of a senior, I guess,
Yeah.
the higher level of school, or I could go And I thought, no, this is great. So it's like an adventure. So
Yeah.
off I went.
Okay.
But so anyway, eventually became an art student and decided during being an art student, decided that I wanted to be a writer. And you know, as I was a big reader, so I was sort of immersed in books and particularly science fiction and horror and
Mm.
fantasy.
What is it about those genres that attracted you?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one, isn't it? Whether it's the mind of the receiver or the things themselves. I think there's something about particularly adventure stories and things. I mean, the first things I used to read as a teenager, uh, when I was much younger, I was reading Tolkien, and then
Mhm.
I carried on reading fantasy. But I was reading things. I was very Catholic in my taste, so I'd go to the secondhand bookstore and I'd be buying, you know, Tarzan and Edgar Rice Burroughs novels and
Mhm.
Flash Gordon and of course Robert E. Howard and Conan and so on. And there was
Mm.
just something about those genres of these thrilling tales and there's these elements of the supernatural and very often you know through writers like Lovecraft, that kind of cosmic horror. There's something about them where you know the character is put into a realm outside of their own kind of experiences and the pragmatic realism no longer suffices to
Mhm.
solve the problem. So they have to kind of either deal with it or conversely, they very often don't deal with it.
Mm.
And it begs the question of the reader then, of course, about you know how would you deal with those situations?
Mhm.
But of
Mhm.
course, horror as well is born out of the environments that you're in, and I grew up in Cheshire, and
Okay.
you know you're sort of surrounded by the very modern, but also the very ancient. That was a big influence on me.
Beautiful.
But yeah, why this genre? I mean, as a kid too. I mean, I loved you know the original Star Trek series, and we had
Mhm.
Doctor Who
Oh,
and
yes.
The Hammer horror films and all that kind of thing. And I was just drawn to those things. I think they were wonderful as much as I was drawn to flying saucers and Bigfoot stories. You know, as a kid. So it
Fascinating.
just stayed with me. I never grew up effectively. That's the problem.
Yeah, my father gave me great advice when I was young. He said, "Donald, don't ever grow up."
Yeah,
And
and
I
it's good advice.
still follow that to this day. I kind of think of adults as just children trapped in the bodies of, you know, people who have
Yeah,
to pay taxes and slog off to work every day and wear a suit and tie, all that stuff. But yeah, it begs the question: what is good horror? I think you know we were discussing before the show a little bit about Nosferatu.
mhm,
I'm having I just had a show on remembering David Lynch with
yeah,
a close friend of mine who's an indie director. I strongly recommend people go check that show out after this or sometime put it in your queue. Um, Highly intelligent young man. I respect him deeply and his opinions on art and film, etc. But we violently disagree about Nosferatu. So we and when you, I know you haven't seen the film yet. I don't know if anyone in the chat can make comments on that. But let me ask you, what makes good horror? Like, really, what is horror? Why would we want to watch a film
mm.
that terrifies us? Doesn't that seem counterintuitive?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one in terms of that it's pushing yourself to the edge. I think is when we do it. You know, when you're a kid and you're building a tree house or you're climbing a rock face, your parents would shudder to see, and you know you're always pushing yourself into up to the edge. And I think it does it in a psychological way. Um, it does it in terms of challenging you to sort of, uh, but if it's done well, like I'm not sure the psychology of why we like
Mm,
horror, I guess, but I think that the way it's done, to me, it's things like one of the my big influences is an English ghost story writer, I suppose you call him, or a writer of the supernatural called M.R. James. And James has this remarkable ability to suggest with very little. Um, and he can be quite florid sometimes, his text, but when he's describing the horror, if you like, of the tale, he does it in a way which is suggestive rather than overt. Which is why I don't like things like slasher movies and things like that, because they, I don't, gore doesn't do it for me. Look, I love a good creature feature, and I like it when the monster's not revealed very often until it's glimpsed, and I think they try to do that from the clips I've seen of this new Nosferatu movie as well. But you have seen it, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it again. I'm obsessed with it right now.
And you thought it was good. You really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, hugely. I mean, it's not a 10 out of 10, but it's definitely quite awesome. And there's quite a lot that could be said about it. But this discussion is making me reflect: why do I like it so much? Why? Sure. What is it about the horror? So, and I'm a massive horror fan, but I just like you, I kind of I despise like the gore. I think that's sort of the low IQ kind of garbage in a way. But psychological horror, aesthetic horror is really quite astonishing. So the first thing is I'm really, really attracted to period pieces. Robert Eggers' last film, The Northman, is one of my favorite films. So I went into this with those biases, the casting and the performances, the palette of the film, extraordinary. I personally believe it's a really great riff on the Dracula world. But there's something unique about this, is that I think that we're fascinated to understand monsters, because maybe we want to protect ourselves. Maybe it's a new realm of psychology that we don't know, that intrigues us, fascinates us. It's mystery, it's kind of like the interest in things like ghosts and trying to communicate with the dead. It's maybe something like that. So it's a curiosity. It's a primal curiosity. And in my view, my interpretation of the film, there's something about specifically the death of Nosferatu at the end, where sex and death are combined in this particular film, that it feels, I had a sense of like deep compassion for the character, that finally he was released from the form of being a vampire, which to me is a type of hell, and he had been so sort of, he had lost all of his humanity over centuries of being a vampire, and the way that he kills people is deeply, deeply inhuman. There's something that it's just, people are literally just meat. They're just literally food. They don't have any purpose, meaning there's nothing to it, And there's a specific scene with these two children that I won't mention in the show, but that really that floored me. I still think about it, but yeah, and I mean, you can see already I'm more excited about this. I think that inside us, we all have a monster, in a sense. Like we have anger, we have rage, there's injustice, there's all kinds of things that happen in our lives. We're betrayed, lied to, cheated, abused, so many terrible things that we experience, and all of that emotion can gel into something very terrible if you let it, I should say. And so there's a strange kind of catharsis that you have with these monsters, depending on the monster. Say like Frankenstein, or you want him to, he's the misunderstood monster. He didn't choose to live like that or be brought back from the dead, and this and that, whatever. We could riff on that for hours, but I don't know. It's I think there's a macabre curiosity.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said about it's mystery, and there's something about it's like in the 19th century, when the world's becoming, it's still religious, but there's this increasing pressure from science, which challenges
Mm.
these deeply held belief systems.
Mm.
Apparently, seems to at first, and then so what happens is, conversely, all of a sudden you have the growth of new spiritual movements like spiritualism,
Mhm.
which uses technology in so they're photographing spirits, but at
Yeah.
the same time is reconnecting with the numinous, and I think horror, to me, is intimately connected to this notion of the numinous, and our innate desire to connect to and to understand that there are these other forces out there, however much we may wish they aren't there.
Mm, mm, mm.
But you're right as well, and you say it's primal. I think I wrote something about I write for on the Obelisk Substack, the
Mhm.
Bizarchives, and I get very rare. I need to write something else, but anyway.
Mm.
Um, but I wrote something about folk horror, and it struck me when I was writing it that when you look at something like Beowulf,
Yeah.
and Grendel, and you think it's folk horror, and those stories would have been told, by a skald who would have recounted the tale in poetic form to a
Mm.
bunch of very hard men
Yeah.
who would have shivered at
Yeah.
the tale, so that it's this desire to have that connection, I think.
That's powerful stuff. I mean, there's so many forms, like you just said, folk horror. I think that concept intrigues me quite a lot. The idea of the horror of the people of our tribe.
Yeah.
Um, Not to go off on a massive tangent, but I did some consulting work for the local Native American nation near where I live. And I dove way into their mythology and learned about their horror stories and things of this nature, that, things that they would tell children, don't go into the woods at night, stay by the longhouse, stay by the fire, and the monsters that they have, like crazy, that's kind of like the man who's like part spider. And then there's another one where there's a sort of a giant head that flies around in the woods and it'll eat
Yeah.
you up. And they're wild, but that it might be interesting to actually create new mythologies like that for our tribes today. That could be fascinating. Maybe instead of going into the woods, it's going into certain neighborhoods in the city. So, yeah, again, like this. Oh, let me segue right into this term weird fiction. What does that mean? What
Yeah.
is weird? What's weird fiction?
It deserves a definition because it's loosely you could say it's horror tales, but it emerged as a subgenre of pulp, and pulp was, the name suggests, the pulp paper, the cheaply printed popular magazines, stories, adventure stories that came out in from the 1890s to the 1950s, when they kind of disappeared and really were replaced by things like paperbacks and so on. But pulp would encompass lots of different things. Incredibly popular, outsold all the great writers, the so-called great writers of the modern period.
Hmm.
But it had subgenres. So there was boxing magazines, and weird fiction is a kind of a subgenre that is both. It can be adventure, so it could be like Conan,
Mhm.
but there could be a supernatural element in it as well. So there could be some kind of demon or something. So it's both horror, adventure, and that other little part of it, which is very much a part of weird fiction, which is cosmic horror,
Mhm.
and that's something which was developed and enormously popularized in later years by Lovecraft.
Did you come up? Did you coin the term weird fiction?
No, it's a term that's been in sort of use since the
Oh,
early 20th century.
okay, and it's basically cosmic fiction. It's the kind of work that the Bizarchives puts out. Is that
It
correct?
is, yeah, and that sort of encompasses that, I would say, yeah.
All right, so we know our genre that we're talking about. So let's
But
get into some of your work. Here on screen we have Aegeon Illustrated Science Fiction. Tell us more about, if I'm pronouncing it right, Aegeon.
yeah,
What's it like working with this publishing company? Who runs it? what what do you do? What have you put out with them?
Yeah. Okay. So Aegeon's run by a guy called Brendan Hurd, and that's with the Aureus Press,
Mm.
and it's produced how many times a year, but it's pretty regular, and it's like the Bizarchives. It's like a sister publication in many ways, so that they're separate entities. But the focus is on science fiction primarily, but in its broadest terms, I think. And it's short stories, and the great thing about these collections like Aegeon, like the Bizarchives, is that they are a number of different authors, short stories, and you'll find if you're reading one, you're not as keen on it, you can move to the next one. It's so it's very easily digestible as well. But the one thing I will say as well about working with both Aegeon and the Bizarchives is the quality of the authors is fantastic. Sort of the I mean, a lot of these guys are guys who are starting for the young guys just writing for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are old hands, and old guys like me, but a lot of us are people who've bashed our heads for a long time against mainstream publishing and not got anywhere because either the magazines who support that the genres we write in don't exist, or we don't fit their specific criteria. And I can tell you, looking at the editions I've got of both Aegeon and the Bizarchives, nothing to do with quality. So that's that. But yeah, so Aegeon, sorry, just to answer your question, I mean, yeah, so that's Brendan, and I submitted a story to them. I heard about them on the grapevine, as you do, and got accepted, and I've published with them several times since. So yeah, they're great to work with.
Fabulous. It seems like there's a kind of, I don't know, a group of writers, a clique of writers that all kind of hover around Aegeon and Bizarchives. Do you know a lot of these writers?
I've spoken to quite a few, yeah, sure. And there are others I should mention. Magazines like Sasova. I don't know if you've heard of Sasova.
No.
That's another one. Then there's the Iron Age guys.
Okay.
There's a whole kind of growing scene of dissident or alternative or independent fiction and other things. Yeah, so it's great. It's really kind of happening.
Again, are most of these guys in the UK, or what's the?
No. It's a pretty good broad mix of UK and US.
Nice, very nice. I love how our cultures cross over in this way. It's so exciting. I've gotten a lot of people who follow my channel now through the Bizarchives. Just really cool writers that are just like super cool people, and we're all on the same page. I think we all understand kind of what's going on in Western civilization, but we're also artists, and so we share that kind of familial quality with each other. So it's just been really, really wonderful. We do have a question in the chat here. We have Mr. Monty is saying, "Is Old Moon Quarterly our guys?" I don't know. Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll have to do some research. I'll write it down.
Mm-hmm. All right. We're also getting some command here by our friend saying we must shill the Bizarchives.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
the shilling shall begin. So I will. I'll change the screen here. What I'd like to know, of course, we know that you have your work published with the Bizarchives, but tell us about one or two of your stories and what are they about, so we can get a taste of your storytelling.
Okay. Out of the new book or out of the Bizarchives specifically?
Why don't we start with the new book, because we want to make sure that we get that covered here.
Well, this ties both of them together in effect, because what this book is it's a collection of 14 short stories, in the genre of weird fiction.
Okay.
But it includes 10 of those stories have been published by the Bizarchives or by Aegeon, and 4 of the stories are new. And I'll tell you a little bit about the first story, which is the eponymous Lovecraft's Cat. Is a very short story. I wrote it as initially when I was thinking about it as a time travel story, but it's not about time machines or anything like that. It's about the interactions between 2 people in 2 different times,
Okay.
and the weaving together of that through the form of the cat, this one-eared cat. So it's not, there's no kind of creature, there aren't any tentacles in that particular story.
Okay.
But it's quite a gentle story actually, but it's just about that kind of strangeness and the idea of time actually not existing, and those gulfs can be crossed.
Did you say the idea of time being non-existent? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah. So this idea of everything floating together in the kind of.
So is this one of Lovecraft's ideas, or this is your personal metaphysics?
Well, it's just my layman's interpretation of different theories, and then I mash them together in my head and make something new. But I use a quote in there from Faulkner, I think it is. Yeah, from Faulkner. And it struck me something about it. It was from one of his novels, but it goes. The past is, where is it now? The past is never dead. It's not even past. And I just love that idea of. I know that there's been sort of conceptual discussions about this in physics, and I don't want to even go there because I'm not a science guy. But this idea of the constancy of time, so actually all times exist or coexist and so on. And I've been listening to kind of stuff, and I just got this idea of, what if there was this interaction over time, but without time machines.
Interesting. How does the cat? like it seems like the cat is the fulcrum of this whole concept, though. I don't get it. How does that work?
Well, the cat's a psychopomp, effectively, and I don't want to give too much away about the plot. It's a story written with Lovecraft fans in mind, or people who know a little bit about Lovecraft and his life. Although he's not explicitly mentioned as a character in the story, he's sort of lurking there. But the cat is, Lovecraft's cat is it's a naughty term, and I'm not allowed to say what in real life Lovecraft's cat was called, because here in the UK I'd go to prison.
Holy, really?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's
wow.
Well, you go to prison for anything these days.
Yeah, it's so draconian right now.
It is unbelievable here, but yeah. So, but you can imagine his cat had a spicy name, and
okay,
and so I just thought that was quite nice. And he was a cat lover. Lovecraft was a cat lover. So you have this cat which is just existing in these. And I say it's a psychopomp, so it's something that leads the souls of the dead to the next life. So that's kind of what, there's a kind of a death element woven into it as well.
Okay.
But there's others in there. I mean, there's some of them. So that's a kind of a little bit, gentler, sort of very short sort of opener. And then there's other stories which are that 3 of the stories are kind of Robert E. Howard style adventures, so they're sort of a little bit more swashbuckling, and in fact all 3 of them are set in South Africa in the kind of late 19th century. So there's a bit of personal kind of looking at South Africa there.
See, now this is something really unique about you. Let me first ask, though, people can purchase Lovecraft's Cat at the Bizarchives. Is that correct?
This one's available on Amazon.
Okay,
This one wasn't published through the Bizarchives. This was just me wanting to get someone suggested to me, shout out to a really great emerging writer, a young guy called R.A. Davis,
Hmm.
who has written for both Bizarchives, AG, and I'm sure other publications. And he said, you should put together some of these stories in a collection. So I did. So it's available on Amazon.
Oh, wonderful. I did have notes I've wrote how to contact you through the show notes, so people can look down at that and find you on social media, and
Yeah.
they should be able to look this up on Amazon pretty easily. So then let's see. Let's jump over to the Bizarchives stories then. What were some of your stories like in there?
Okay, so there were different ones. The Reliquary was the first one I had, and that was really it started off as a sort of a epistolary story. So there's a letter, you're reading a letter, and then it goes into the kind of these found documents. So yeah, and then that's to do with a 19th century photographer who becomes this kind of dissolute character and ends his life photographing seances and the kind of encounter that he has at the end of it. And then I'm not sure which one was next in the Bizarchives. It might have been the Pimlico Vampire. That was set in 1970s London about a guy who's worked out a way to prolong his life by taking the lives of others, but in an occult way, using sort of dark magic. So he's sort of draining bodies, and it's really about the hapless police trying to track him down, and the characters of the police trying to sort of solve this case.
So let me ask you: Do you use science fiction horror as a kind of a way to make parables, to make moral comments, to do commentary on society, or any kind of other things that are important to you? Is it more about the craft and eliciting an emotion of the excitement, the horror, all of that, or is it leaning more towards some form of commentary? How would you describe your work in that way?
Yeah, it's no, I wouldn't. I'm not trying to sort of teach through, by projecting my. I mean, I think they'll come through. Your own beliefs come through anyway in the way you choose to write. But it's not about either using politics or morals or anything like that in there. It's really about trying to elicit a feeling in the reader, and to take them somewhere else, if but for a brief time, so to able to paint a picture vividly enough that they can suspend disbelief.
Beautiful. So what are the feelings that you have that are so powerful and compelling that you're forced to write these stories?
Yeah, that's that's the $1 million question. I mean, I certainly have to create, and I spent 30 years in so-called academia, in art schools, trying to be an artist, a photo artist. So photography was my sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
And it kind of, it was okay, and I had exhibitions in different parts of the world and so on, but
Nice.
never made any money. It was sort of, but I did it.
Okay.
But I have to make, and I think what I realized was when I gave teaching up and took early retirement, what I realized was that all that time I was making pictures. What I was trying to do was make pictures of stories and all the pictures that I made were actually just kind of stories, and they're often quite weird. So
okay.
So I just went back to what I'd started to do in my 20s before, because life intervened, and I got married and had our first child, and had a job. So writing went by the wayside. But I went back to that kind of urge to create, and it just, instead of making images, I just put words together instead, and paint pictures that way. And but where it comes from, I'm in all seriousness, it's a mystery to me.
Hmm.
There's a David Lynch quote where he talks about, sometimes, your mind just drifts out into a corridor and floats down through it's like that. I find that, the way to enable it is to be very rigorous in your, so
Mhm.
I'll always start writing at 11 o'clock, so it's quite late in the morning, but
Mhm.
I'll try and start then, and I'll try and do 2 hours.
Mm.
I'll try and do 1,000 words a day.
Mm.
It's not a huge amount of writing, but it's, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's a little bit less. But
Mm.
I find that the discipline of actually sitting down and having to write enables the process.
Right.
But the process itself to me is very mysterious, and it's mysterious because I write blind, so I don't sit down. I never plot things out, and I never
Oh my
have a
God.
I never have a preconceived idea of
Hmm.
what's going to happen in a story.
Hmm.
Um, generally, and so I write blind. So I just sit down and then I have to tune in, and it sounds odd, and it's very odd to me, and I used to teach history of photography, and one of the things I used to love teaching about was spirit photography, which I mentioned before.
Oh yeah, that's
But
fascinating.
but but I feel like a spirit medium sometimes because I
Yes.
sit down and I kind of tune in, and it's like a radio station, and then
Mhm.
I'll hear some dialogue, not
Yes.
literally hear it,
Sure.
but I'll hear it in my mind, and think, oh, that's quite interesting, and I'll write it, and
Mhm.
then the conversation will develop, and then I'll start to see the characters emerging, and then the story will kind of
Oh my God.
present itself to me.
Wow.
But it
Wow.
remains a mystery to me until the very end, and I think, I mean, one of the things which I always ask this of other creative people that generally, but when I speak to them, is where this comes from, because I mean, the characters themselves often take on a life of their own.
Yeah.
So you conceive of them in this way, and then all of a sudden they're acting in this other manner and doing something else, and it's a very mysterious process, and I'm just glad that it's sort of happening for me at this time in my life, and
Mhm.
um, I don't mean this time in my life because I'm really really old. I'm not that old, but I mean now, that this is happening, and it's great.
You're
I've been writing a lot.
you're young at heart. Well, I think this is maybe one of the best things about getting older is that you get better. You've got so much time, experience, wisdom, knowledge, what have you, that you've got more to work with and you're smarter at how to put it together, how to accomplish the goals of eliciting emotion, the aesthetics, the pacing, dialogue, all these various elements that make up the feast of your artwork. So, what I find really fascinating here, though, is the shamanistic approach that you seem to have. And I've said this many times over the years that I do think of shamans as the artists, or
Mm.
rather, as artists as the shamans of society.
Yeah.
That we are the ones that go into that place within and we cultivate the ability mentally, emotionally, spiritually to listen and to receive, and then this information comes forth. And just to jump back to the David Lynch thing, my friend on the show the other day, he came up with the term American surrealism, and I'd never heard
Yeah.
that before. And I'm telling you, my red, white, and blue flag, waving it in the air, felt so patriotic.
He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. It's a perfect summation of Lynch.
So my understanding of David Lynch is that he's very much about that process, that his work is very much informed by dreams. And if not, they're dreams in themselves in many ways, depending on which film you're talking about. And I think there's a lot to grapple with there. My rule on this is that if you're going to do that, make sure there's enough information for the viewer, reader, listener to piece together their own interpretation. If it's just totally absurd, then it becomes Dada. You know what I'm saying? Then it's kind of postmodernism, and it's more about alienating the audience, and it turns into this Marxist bourgeois, where art is so far above you plebeians that you can't even understand it. No, there's no meaning to it, so there's nothing to understand, because you hate the common man. That's why. But anyway, this is I really should maybe allow myself more leeway in my own creative process. I'm more methodical. Do you ever use kind of templates or formats in terms of, in story writing, we've got tropes, you have the three act play, like beginning, middle, end, the crescendo, climax, denouement. And like, what do you use all that stuff, or how do you work?
Yes, but I don't consciously use them, I suppose, apart from when I write something and I've got it all down, and then I'll look at it again, and you might say, well, this bit needs to go actually here, and this bit needs to go there. So you do start to innately structure it, and obviously you have to have some kind of ending and conclusion which makes sense to the thing that's come before it. But I'm not a structuralist in the sense of planning. I don't sort of. I mean, sometimes it just unfolds itself, and then I will have to kind of become the architect later and maybe just move things around a bit and take bits out that seem a bit bloated or whatever. But
you're such a master of the craft that you can just
instinctively.
I guess Tai Chi, you just move parts of the plot around.
Yeah, you said before about when you're getting older, well, I really sure wish I hope that's true. But I think, but as well about dreams. I mean, I wrote a story, and I think it is my favorite story that I've written. It doesn't appear in Lovecraft's Cat, unfortunately, because it's about to be published somewhere else, so I'm not allowed to. But it was a dream that I had on a recurring basis for about 6 months, and I had it at least once a week, and it wasn't very significant. It was just a dream where I would find at some point in the dream I would enter a tower, a stone tower or keep, and there would be stairs going down, and they would just go down forever. I'd go down so far, and then I would stop, and then I'd wake up, and it kept happening and kept happening, and I thought, what is this thing?
Yeah.
Why do I keep dreaming this? And anyway, eventually, I decided. So I wrote this story about it, and then the dream stopped. So, I don't know. It just. But the story when I wrote it, I was very pleased with. So who knows? And in Xanadu de Kubla Khan's sacred pleasure dome decree, wasn't it? Coleridge, and he woke up, and then he was writing down this, Xanadu, this great poem, and someone rang his doorbell, and he forgot the rest of it.
So I understand that, like, Howard writes like that with, like, he says that Conan, like, is basically a voice that comes to him, and all he does is, like, he commands the voice, like, or rather he whatever the voice says, he writes it down. He just get the hell out of the way. What it tells me to write, I write. He's channeling it completely.
Absolutely. And when you hear someone say something like that, you sort of take it as maybe a poetic license and thing. But it's absolutely true. Yeah.
It's quite powerful. I can't say for sure, well, I know what I believe. And I will say, like, I studied lucid dreaming for a long time. I'm studying about astral projection now. I don't do it, but I think I've had some astral projection experience, just like without even trying, just organically. That's another show. But what I'm trying to say here is that I do believe that we are visited in our dreams by sentient beings. It's also very much our subconscious mind that is coming up with thought forms and patterns of so many kinds. Maybe, psychologists tell us that our subconscious mind is constantly trying to resolve things in our conscious life. And maybe there could be elements there. Some of it, I think, is just absurd. I don't think it has any meaning. It's just the nature of the mind and the subconscious is just to produce ideas. It's an idea machine. and it just spits out this, that, and the next thing in like one damn thing after another. It doesn't make sense. So you have to have some understanding of the mind itself, the subconscious, and then start looking into the esoteric realms of what's after that, to maybe answer this question of like, where does art come from? It's quite fascinating. We're looking at an image here, Albion, by C.P. Webster. Could you tell us what's this about?
So this was something I began writing back in the mid-90s. So it just took years and years and years before I finished it, because I just kind of set it aside. What it is it's about a journey, and it started off as a kind of a spiritual journey. So a character is he's living in this dystopian Britain, not unlike our own, but in some slightly future time, and it's kind of steampunky. There's lots of big factories and steam engines and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But he goes on this journey, and then lots of strange things start to happen to him. So sometimes he's in his own world, sometimes he moves into other worlds, and then it's the second character is a woman, and she's having sort of similar things, and it's just about how these two individuals come together through a variety of kind of circumstances where there's supernatural elements or paranormal elements, other worlds are involved. I've just looked at it before. It's that volume that's on the screen it's 790 pages. It's a huge thing, and
Wow.
it was. I think it's quite fun. It's had some good sort of reviews, but this is a spiritual journey. So it's all about and how they come together eventually, and how they transform into something else. And that sounds very prosaic, actually, but there's lots of adventure and airships and
I like airships,
creatures and all kinds of things, zombies, and there's all kinds of things in there. So it's sort of a whole series of adventures.
Why did you name it Albion?
Well, that was my sort of nod to William Blake. Blake said, it's like, all things begin and end on Albion's ancient druid rocky shore, or something like that.
Oh my
and
God.
this idea of the giant Albion.
That's
Sorry?
It's so enchanting,
Yeah. It's this idea of this ancient place, and there's this ancient mystery within these individuals within this story. And the regime in the story is trying to find these oddities, these people who have got this difference. So it's all that's tied into it. There's temporal powers and there's spiritual powers and all kinds of things. But so Albion is just the ancient name of Britain,
Yes.
and so it's set there. So most of the time.
Do how do I say the female and male in this story? Do they represent anything, or are they meant to just be just characters, just people?
They're just people, but they're they're also they're sort of on their own kind of spiritual journey, each of them. So they're also learning, what their difference is, because they've got this kind of their destiny is to meet, and once they meet, then they'll. I was quite interested in the idea of alchemy when I started writing it. So I was interested in the whole kind of alchemical process as it was laid out by mystics and alchemists. This idea of finding the pure, and also having to go through all these different stages. There's the Negrido and so on. So everything's transmuting and changing, and that's what these characters do.
So that you just you stepped on a landmine with that question, because I'm fascinated with alchemy myself. I'm interested. I read and study about Hermeticism, Gnosticism, all these various things. I practice Qigong, and there's just so many aspects to it that's quite important and valuable, but mysterious. What resources have you looked into on alchemy that interest you and that somehow find a way into your work?
Yeah, I think probably my first direct introduction to alchemy was Jung, and I really got interested in Jung because he was this famed psychoanalyst or psychologist who took a real interest in the spiritual, or seemed to appear to.
Mm.
I think I know he's not for everyone, and some people don't like him, but I just found him very interesting, and that was my introduction to it. And then I just looked into different texts, and in my kind of interested way, just looked into different things like that and built it into my kind of cosmos at the time.
Okay, so I understand I'm not an expert on Carl Jung, but I understand there's a practice where one has to sort of go into their dark side,
Yeah,
shadow.
yeah, and I think I know other writers have used this. Ursula Le Guin used it
Hmm.
in her Earthsea trilogy. This idea of the shadow, and the whole the first part of that is all about this wizard who's trying to stop this shadow self, but it's about resolving some aspect of himself. But yeah, and I think it just intrigues me, that kind of idea of things being both to do with the physical body and the mind, but also that we for example tap into this this idea of the collective unconscious. I quite enjoy that idea of the idea of we have this link, and I think we do have. I think because I sometimes you sort of think of things and you think, where's that come from? And I think you inherit memory almost somehow as well. And I'm not saying that you physically inherit it, or it's difficult to pin down where memory actually sits in the human body, but whether there's this greater realm or this other record that we tap into, I don't know. I'm intrigued by mystery, and I'm
Yes.
intrigued by these strange things. And I was going to say before about I use the terms paranormal and supernatural interchangeably, but
Mm.
effectively these things, if you ask 100 people, 70 or 80 of them will probably tell you something strange has happened to them.
Oh yeah. Oh God,
Can't explain.
I've had a lot of paranormal experience, but yeah, go on.
So it's actually quite normal, but it seems to be quite normal. It's something, the spiritual is all around us. These worlds are all around us. I believe. I don't know.
I agree. No, I can. There's quite a lot out there on this topic. I'd say that, I mean, depending on if you're tuned into it, the world is sort of undergoing a type of a spiritual revolution, in that there's so many new sources of information and data points that connect and line up that are showing us new pathways, new doorways of understanding these esoteric realms and all this information. What, of course, is always the problem is who controls the information, who is, where's the counterintelligence being planted, because some of this information is extraordinarily powerful. Somebody in a certain mindset might call it a cult. Another person would say that it's quantum physics, depending on who you are and what your frame of reference is. So, I'm just super excited about that kind of stuff myself. I'm not any kind of expert or guru, but on my show, I regularly talk about these things. They fascinate me. So they seem to really be that topic right there. It seems to be woven into your work in one way or another, or at least an inspiration. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely, and like yourself, I'm fascinated by these things, and I'm a magpie. I'm eclectic, and I'll listen to different YouTube channels, people talking about mysteries and people vanishing, and then I love it all. It just fascinates me, and it's because it's where the banality of the ordinary world, the world that you live in and every day,
Yeah.
is punctured by something else that says you don't know it all. There are mysteries
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't know,
Oh my God.
and I don't want to know it all. Just I like the idea that there's mystery there, and I think touching that, and I think that's what these stories do. It's sort of it sort of takes you somewhere else for a very brief time. You can
Mhm.
you can allow it to and then you can if it's very dark story, you can step away and say, well, thank goodness it's not real.
Yeah, that's a whole other subject. But I would say that you have a kind of romance with mystery. That's kind of what I'm
Absolutely.
feeling, which is very charming and very exciting, and I think a really strong impetus for people to buy your books, to read your stories. So here's an interesting kind of wrap it up sort of question. In the future, how would you like people to remember your legacy of your work?
Um, do you know what? It's something I sort of I I I don't. I certainly don't think in terms of legacy, but I think if somebody picked up one of my books in 100 years time or 50 years time or 10 years time or whatever it was and enjoyed it, that'd be great. And I think I just have to just keep writing. I just have lots of stories to tell. Um, in my very um, reserved English way, I'll say, buy my books. You might enjoy them, but it's. I think I'm pretty good at what I do, and I think and I'm sure that they're not for everyone. This genre isn't for everyone, but if you do like supernatural, paranormal, strange, then I think there'll be something in there that people
Oh, come on, mate, you're too modest.
you, you know,
A little bit more there. I bet if I get a few pints in you, you'll shout to the hills how great your books are. That's what you should do.
yeah, I was thinking about accents today, and I was saying to you before the show about I think you're pretty damn good. I, I'm a terrible accent person, and I love doing accents. I've got a cousin who's Australian, and I tease them endlessly by doing my Australian accent, which is terrible. It's like a kind of a warped crocodile Dundee, but, but it sounds good to me, so
Right.
I just keep on
That's
doing them. But yours are good. I,
I
I
appreciate that, dude,
yeah,
because I'm afraid I'm making an ass of myself, when I do that kind of stuff. But it's fun. I don't know. I just find it so much fun. I feel like I'm a
yeah.
frustrated actor, that I wish that I could be in film and play all these cool roles. And so it's just fun to sort of step out of yourself for a minute and have a little fun. Plus, I'm half English, and so I have this I'm an
Yeah.
Anglophile. I have this intense love and passion for my people. So that's kind of me play acting, I suppose. But
Yeah, but you actually do it very well, and I think one of my favorites is doing a French accent, and I've got schoolboy French. I mean, I don't speak French, but I love doing that accent. But it probably sounds terrible, So it just pleases me.
yes, it's funny to do, like in America, we'll do that when we want to pretend that we're very high cultured. I would like a French croissant if you do not mind. I prefer the French fries. It would much better. So just this is a goofy joke, but
Yeah,
it's probably hard to do a French accent accurately, though. It's the sounds of that language are
yeah.
so different from ours.
I mean,
Uh,
it's a lovely language to listen to, but we have the same with the French. I mean, we sort of say, we have this Hercule Poirot, although he was Belgian, but this idea of the francophone who looks down on the English thinks and shakes their head sadly. So, yeah, we have that too.
not everyone can be French, though. So anyway, um, well, it's really really been a joy spending some time with you and opening up your world to my audience. I'm really really happy to see all my friends in the chat that came. We've got some fabulous friends in this community and brilliant writers, artists, activists, people that care about Western civilization. And it's not some abstract thing that happened a long time ago. We are the lifeblood of Western civilization here and now. And so when we interact with our creators, artists, poets, musicians, what have you, then we are blowing life into it and we're receiving back from it that life-giving energy. So definitely get involved in feeding yourself with that kind of art and culture. And here's a fabulous author right here with some amazing books. In the notes of the show, you can see links to his social media. You can look up his works on Amazon as well. And I just want to thank you. Is there any questions from the chat? Maybe just a quick second here if anybody wants to pop out a question. Otherwise, I will say thank you so much, sir. If you want to just tell people where they can find you, or any final words for the show.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here and speak to everyone. And thank you, Illuminatus, for in the chat there, for sticking with us and listening to it. I've got a YouTube channel which is really just me posting stuff. It's not very exciting at the moment, but there's a few things on there. But I'm on Telegram. I think you said you put the links below. I'm trying to build up a profile on X, and I'm on Instagram. I'm a very, very bad social media person because I don't have a smartphone. I just use my laptop, and I'm just not a clicking kind of person. So this is a great opportunity, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity for me to come and talk.
Illuminatus asks, has Mr. Weber read Sacred Times Part 2?
I have not yet. It's in my pile.
Okay, there's only so many hours in the day, right?
I've got I've got to get a few books through, but it's there, sir.
So a quick plug for the Bizarchives.com. Be sure to get over there. Again, the links in the show notes. Aurora Press, with fabulous work coming out of there. CP Webster is on X at CP Webster 77. Amazon, of course, look up CP Webster, Facebook, and elsewhere. So thanks again for this fabulous show, my friend. I really enjoyed it. I hope the audience enjoyed it. Please, please share this link in your networks and encourage people to listen to it. Let's grow this community. Every single one of us is a kind of a guerrilla marketing agent, and the more, the more the merrier, right? There's power in numbers. So God bless you guys. Let's keep working forward and being positive. All right. Take care and see you. I'll be streaming my art stream in a few hours, by the way. Just let you know if you want to come back later. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, folks.
Cheers.